Since they're here, we'll go ahead and get started with the next panel, which is making cyber threat detection actionable. And it seems like you can't go a day without having a conversation about cyber threat, right? Situational awareness regarding cybersecurity is key to maintaining trust as well as protecting your corporate and personal reputation. It seems your critical infrastructure and your personal information is under attack 24/7. And until recently, you probably weren't even aware of it until the damage was done. This panel today is going to help you understand how you can expedite detection, identification, and classification of cyber threats. They'll help you understand how you can be more visually alerted of these attacks and new innovations that are available in the cyber threat detection software arena. I believe there's three esteemed colleagues that I'm pleased to introduce here. I know one of them, Chris McIntosh, CEO of Bent Ear Solutions. And while he is on here for cybersecurity, this man knows everything. He's a genius. With my belief, all of these are, Chris, are all these folks in your organization. You got David Cox, Global Threat Intelligence, and Ray Neal, who just got added to it, GIS manager of Bent Ear, but Laura told me that he's the brains behind the operation. So I don't believe any of that. But Chris, I'll turn it over to you, and I'm really looking forward to this session.
Thanks, Dave. And I did not pay you to say those kind words. Ray is with Bent Ear. David Cox, though, I'm really excited to be presenting with David because what he's doing in the cyber threat and security space around the world is truly exciting, and what you're going to see here, I think you're really going to find interesting, coupling what David's doing with the geospatial capabilities that are out there today. I'm going to kick it off and then turn it over to David and Ray. Cyber threats and cyber attacks are obviously on the rise. They are something that all of you are dealing with in one way or another, and much of the situational awareness around the cyber arena revolves on what devices, what assets, what switches are being targeted, what servers are being targeted. However, to date, the ability to rapidly understand that based on location has been fairly limited. So David Cox at Global Threat International and us at Bent Ear have combined forces to take the power of cyber threat detection and monitoring and geospatial software to provide true situational awareness about what's happening, and more importantly, well, not more importantly, as importantly, what the impact is. So if it's a switch in a substation, knowing that would more rapidly allow you to mitigate the damage. So David and Ray are gonna show you what they're putting together, and then hopefully it'll spur a robust conversation for the remainder of the session about what can be done with once you know and can see in real time what cyber threats are impacting your organization and how you can respond and recover from them. So that, David, I'll turn it over to you, sir. David is in another time zone and it is late at night for him. So thank you for joining us today. Over to you, David.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, thanks a lot. I'll start out, give a little history. The way that we got together was I'm currently in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we were responsible for building the National Cybersecurity Center in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Started that project in 2014, post the Aramco problem. I worked with the US government and then worked with the Saudis directly to build out their center. We brought the country from a level of maturity from rated 36 by the ITU at the UN to number 2 in 2022. So we used a lot of what you're going to see today as part of our effort to secure the nation. And we're doing this as well for a company called Sistal in the UK. And we've got what you'll see today is deployed. It's operational. We have a venture with Kyndryl, which is the IBM spinoff. And so all of the tech and the tooling that you see today is in place and operational. So what I'll do is I'll flip over to the share the screen. And let's see, I'll just go to my desktop here. And I think everybody can see that. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay, perfect. So what we're looking at is this is a network that's being monitored in real time. And one of the things that you probably all experienced is, dealing with seams and the tooling around seams. What we've been able to do is put together a capability that just allows a tap at the network head-in so that we can get 360 view of everything that's going on in real time. And so what you're seeing is this network operation in real time. Of course, this dashboard is being viewed by a team of SOC members, and this one is in Glasgow. This is actually Systol's network that we're monitoring here, and Systol is an MSSP and uses this capability within their own infrastructure as well as all their customer infrastructure. So what we're able to do is see what's happening in real time. We can click through, we can look at each one of these connections in real time, and should something pop up, we'll see it in real time. And what we're able to do here is we can fly into ticketing systems, and we can look at the different intelligence that we have around each one of the endpoints. And I'll get into this real quick. Okay, so here's Outlook 365. This is a connection to Outlook. Whenever you create a ticket in the system, it actually fills the ticket out for you. So for example, if I was here and I decided that, wow, I don't really like what's happening here.
Ticket generated.
I create a ticket, and then I can fly right into the system to look at that ticket. And what it'll do is it'll correlate everything related to that ticket in the system. And see, it popped up. It's got the tickets here. I can go right to correlation and see all the associated tickets with that ticket. Moving on to some of the other capabilities that we have is we have a big, now, of course, what you're seeing here is the manual operation of it. This is all happening automatically, and it's all organized in a way that all of this happens in the background. It produces the tickets, it correlates, and it provides all of the relative enrichments to the tickets. What we can do also is if we see something we don't like in the SOC, we can kill it immediately.
IP terminated.
We can kill it immediately. One of the things that we found here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as well as some of the work that Chris is doing, is that people are it's very difficult to manage CMDB databases accurately. And when we're trying to deploy first responders inside of a national infrastructure, it gets very complicated. So what we did is to work with Chris and the team, because Esri is so well covered here in the kingdom, as well as in many of the organizations that Chris works with, to develop a methodology so that we could go in and geospatially identify each one of the assets. So what I'll do is I just click here and I can fly right into that asset, and I can see exactly where it is and exactly what it is. And I can see an actual picture of it. Here's the asset, here's its location. We have the lat long, a description, and we have a picture of the asset that we can look into here. We can take pictures of the actual configuration, the wiring. We can provide additional information to first responders so that we can find what, Chris has trained me over the year is, what good stuff is next to bad stuff, and what do we need to do to isolate the good stuff from the bad stuff. And so with that, I'm going to let Ray talk a little bit about this particular feature. So Ray, do you want to talk a little bit about this and kind of steer me in a direction?
Sure. The idea here is to geo-enable what we're doing here, right? And I think that's something that's relatively new. There's not as much of this, I think, in the cyber security realm, as far as being able actually to see where geographically things are. So what we've done, and what David just spoke to, is we created a link where you can actually then pull up, a useful information product by Esri, and it'll actually take you in. And once you have that geo-enabled aspect to it, well, now you can mix it with other data sets. You can do all sorts of analysis. You can bring into play all sorts of tools and widgets, like he's showing you here, to be able to, you know, look at it in a more analytical way, you know, geospatially. Did you want me to share my screen so I can share how you sort of build that inventory?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
All right.
I'll stop.
Give me 1 sec. All right. Are you seeing my screen yet?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So in order to geo-enable the computer assets, you need to build an inventory of what you're tracking, categorize in whatever ways make sense to you, and with fairly precise location information. You can sort of see a building footprint here in the map that I'm using, the base map. So in the Esri GIS world, a really efficient way to do this is with a simple form-based app called Survey 123. It works directly with geospatial feature layers like we're using here to build this inventory. So in the real world, you would probably use a mobile app version, something like this, of Survey 123. You know, it's loaded on an iPhone, an Android phone, or tablet. But for the purposes of this demo, I've got a web app version of it running. It's pretty simple. You use a map to figure out where you want to place the new device in space, and you can drag the map around, search for places, just like you would in Google Maps. You can zoom in and out. Once you're zoomed in far enough, you can place your flag on the building footprint where you want it. Zoom in a little further. Just kind of a random building here for the purposes of doing this. And then you can fill out the form that goes below this. And I'll just put some minimal information here. We'll call this building printer. We'll make it a server. And we'll give it some fake data here to work with. And at the end of this, this is where you'd have the opportunity on a device to actually take a picture. In this case, I could drop in an image, but we'll go ahead and submit. So now what we have is a new cybersecurity asset that's going to show up on a map if I zoom in far enough. Actually, I'm not quite sure where I just put that asset, so we'll see if I can find it. Pasco's a big place. And then once it's been added here, it's going to be integrated into the geospatial calls that Global Threat Intelligence is making. You'll also notice that we've integrated this channel into Microsoft Teams. That means we can leverage all of the automation workflows that Microsoft offers. So in addition to Esri adding this new device to the map, another automation got triggered in the background and fired off a notification in the form of this chat entry here called an adaptive card. So the logic to create this notification could be triggered by anything we want it to be. Maybe we have logic in the background that's looking for duplicate device names or devices that are in proximity to something else that's in the area, any kind of geospatial analysis. So there's many scenarios that could play out with this. So people that are in this team and channel can get notifications when one of these pops up. We could also have logic to send out email notifications, chat messages with the right backend modules. And of course, there are reporting capabilities. For a different demonstration, I had daily morning reports being generated in a PDF format and then automatically pushed into Teams into a file sharing tab. So again, this is something that can be configured to whatever is useful to an organization about the cybersecurity assets. It could also be automatically sent to recipients. So that's what I had to show, David. I didn't know if we'd have any questions.
Well, the big idea here, as Tom likes to say, is every IP address is affiliated with something on the planet. And if you start translating IP addresses from threat detection software like what GTI does to a location-based device on the planet, you then can very quickly determine impact based upon proximity. And that's one thing that's been missing in many of the corporate or the organizational solutions that are out there. Also, this allows you to take it a step further. Now, this takes some additional work, but the geodatabase that these assets would reside in, since you're using GIS, you can make that a relational database. So you would actually be able to know what system is being impacted based upon the asset that's being attacked using the interconnectivity of a geospatial database. And there's new capabilities that are out there now. So this, I don't know, this switch is tied to this substation, which impacts this line, which downstream feeds this piece of critical infrastructure. That connection can be done geospatially now. So you could know and get an alert in Teams that something is being attacked that's going to affect this other thing. And that now is really exciting to be able to understand the interdependencies between the cyber infrastructure and the physical. David, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the most critical pieces that we're seeing is the ability to populate the information with network segmentation, so that when the first responders, particularly in the CSIRT group, see the geospatial relationship to the attack, they're able to go in, identify, and provide, a very, very accurate ticket, back to IT and the first responders to go ahead and start isolating things. And so this has really never been done. And one of the things that I showed you was, I'll pop back in here real quick, was just the fact that we're monitoring this in real time, which enables us to react in real time. Let me get back into the tunnel. And whenever we're able to do that, we can react to, what is increasingly becoming some very complex threats that really require us to get in and isolate quickly. As you know, a lot of what's going on is, starting to traverse laterally in the network. And with this system, we're able to identify that immediately and action it. I can show you, I've got just a real quick demonstration of what it looks like when this happens inside of a network. And so I'm just playing a video right now, and you could see that burst, right? And what that burst was the ignition of, some malware that was attempting to put some crypto lockers inside of the infrastructure. And so this thing fired a couple of times. And what we were able to do is to immediately block access to it, identify geospatially what it was attacking here, and then dispatch the emergency responders to respond to it. So it's a real critical, I guess, the two things to take away from this. First of all, real-time visualization of your network is very important. A lot of people say, well, we want to automate that. We need to, well, that's great. But in the time of crisis, we need to be looking at this network in real time to see what these guys are trying to get after. That's critical. Second, we have to be able to geospatially understand what they're trying to get after and be able to understand what has to happen right now to isolate that land segment so that we can mitigate whatever it is that they're trying to do. So, Chris?
So, yeah, Mr. Vanderbilmen, do we have any questions?
I haven't seen any from the members of the attendees yet. I'm sure there will be some, but my first question would be, not being a cyber and an IT person, and you making the analogy to my little world of the electrical infrastructure. How hard is it to build out that the baseline so you know what you're monitoring? I mean, you talked about having a cell phone app, or an iPad app, or a laptop app to do that. Does that take a physical visit to every one of those locations to start getting that data in? Or I know IT people probably have a CSV spreadsheet or an Excel spreadsheet of every piece of equipment that they've ever seen in their lifetime. What's that look like?
So that's a really good question. And the answer you're going to love, Dave, is it depends. um, and it depends on the quality of the asset management and inventorying and cataloging of your organization. So if you know where all of these assets are and being managed and have the IP addresses already logged and cataloged, we can use a lot of that information right ahead of time. If you don't, it is going out one device at a time and collecting that with a tool such as the one that Ray showed, and taking pictures and physically going and seeing them. The good news is that the tools like what Ray showed there are so simple to use and designed to be extraordinarily simple, just a couple buttons, that your workforce can do a lot of that if you should so choose. And so the staff in the substation, the staff in the building or in the factory or whatever the case may be, could be a force multiplier to go out and collect that information. If not, somebody like us will go and do it and just have to work our way through it. David, do you have anything to add to that?
Actually, if you
Yeah.
don't mind, if I jump in real quick, also something to point out there is there are possibilities for simplifying that workflow further. That product I showed you, Survey 123, it's actually possible to have it go do queries after you put in just a little bit of information. So if maybe you have a lot of this information already in a data set somewhere about all your assets, but you don't have the geolocation of it. You don't know exactly where it is. Well, if you go out and you go to the location of it, and you can put in that beginning piece of identifying information there, it can go query and fill in the rest of the blanks for you. So if some of this information already exists somewhere, there's potential to make that process a lot quicker.
Yeah, what we're doing, we've got a big airline here in the Middle East that we're ramping up with. And so the first phase for us, and they've got 170,000 endpoints and server infrastructure. They've got cloud infrastructure as well as dedicated on-prem infrastructure. And so we take CMDB, the database, and we migrate that to the geospatial database, less the geospatial tags. We then use MaxMindDB to then all the IP addresses and release. Get a first run geospatially where everything is. So now we've got what is a fairly good representation of the entire architecture in a geospatial realm. That now the geospatial ID for the lat long that's coming out of MaxMind is not necessarily going to be what we want at the end of the day. Then we categorize the assets in the estate by criticality. And then we set in force the guys to go out and to start collecting the accurate geospatial data on the critical, on the critical assets that they want to capture first. And then over time, we just have a plan to migrate all of those to a more accurate representation. So that's kind of the way that we're doing it now. It does not, that the first phase of this is pretty quick. I mean, we just go in, we upload CMDB. We then add whatever network segment information that we need to add to it, and the IT guys do that. And then we marry that with MaxMind. We use the financial services MaxMind, which is fairly accurate from an IP perspective, which gives us generally, a handful of locations in a big data center, for example. You're not going to get a whole bunch, but you're going to at least know where the data center is. And then we go in and populate it more accurately. And what we're doing in that case is we're actually taking pictures of racks and taking pictures of the serial numbers on all the machines, taking pictures of particular pieces of wiring that represents the breakpoints for the network. And then, of course, adding in the LAN segment information for the IT group, for the first responders to be able to do their jobs.
Right. Hey, Chris, there's one question that came up in the chat that what type of organization would best benefit from this software, and how do you define it? To me, how do you define a use case that says, this is a solution that you need?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the answer in my mind is all organizations. If you have a digital presence in your organization. Now, the why behind that varies dramatically. So if you are a government agency or financial services or something of that ilk, it's going to be identifying and managing attacks on your core components or the services you provide, such as law enforcement, fire. I mean, we've had instances where government agencies have been ransomware and locked out of their own systems. It's important to know it's Dave Vanderbloom and the director of the agency's computer in his office that's being attacked. It could be as simple as that. Okay.
Yeah, and it's not always so obvious. I mean, you'd be surprised whenever we're looking at, whenever we're getting alerts and we're having to process those alerts, whether it be in a national defense mode or if we're inside of a enterprise SOC. Exactly what Chris is saying is a big problem because people do not keep the CMDB databases up to date. Assets are moving around and nobody knows where it is. And this is a big problem.
And then flip side of that, Dave, is if you are a infrastructure operator who has SCADA or has switches or has stuff that actually operates and manages your equipment, then obviously you want to know this as well because it's impacting your infrastructure and it can cause physical damage to your infrastructure if something's attacked and taken over, and obviously has downstream effects to your customers. But also think about this a bit more broadly. So let's put this in the context of something like SICEnet. Imagine a world where this could be shared. The information of these attacks could be shared, and then patterns emerge cross-jurisdictionally, cross-organizationally, cross-industry, and maybe it helps with early detection of a broader attack or a broader incident because it breaks the inherent interoperability of geospatial information, breaks down some of those silos and allows entities to say, hey, we've got a broad sweeping attack across the energy sector in the United States. That could be identified. SICEnet, just to explain that, is All Hazards Consortium Secure Information Sharing Environment, which is a geospatial enterprise in the cloud, and is open to all of its members with secure access to geospatial information being brokered or procured by AHC. And if you are interested in learning more about it, you should please reach out to Tom Moran, and I'm sure he'd be happy to brief you on it.
Right.
Yeah, I'll add just one little thing to that. Sorry. IoT infrastructure. This stuff is everywhere. It's real hard to put sensors and data on it. We come in, we put a 360-degree wrapper at the head end of the network, and we immediately can correlate geospatial information and tell the responder, particularly with electric utilities, water companies, and what have you, where those assets are precisely. Sorry.
Yeah, and IoT environment, we could have a whole other session on this, David. You're absolutely right. I mean, they're getting in through the thermostat,
exactly.
and being able to identify that before they further penetrate potentially or get into other things, where they're getting into the thermostat and building L27 on your campus. That's important to know. That's important to know. It's important to know for response, and it's important to know for after action too.
So it's kind of there's another question that popped up from David Olive in the Q&A that kind of leads to this Internet of Things stuff. Does your system detect and identify counterfeit or prohibited parts, chips in the hardware that your customers are using? And if not, what tools do you use to ensure that no counterfeit or prohibitive hardware or components are being installed in that network?
So to discern the differences between the SIEM-like operations and what we do, we're looking at network traffic, the north-south traffic that's coming into the network head-in. We do identify and fingerprint all the devices and can quickly determine if the device has changed inside of the network. So that's a fairly that's a fairly rote process that we provide. But one of the things that we mentioned earlier with these IoT devices, you're very limited in the kind of telemetry that you can put on them to receive that kind of information. But we do provide that capability right at the head in the fingerprinting methodology that we use to understand that these devices aren't changing. Without we can indicate a change and then ticket that change, and then that can be verified by the Security Operations Center or the IT department.
It's not simple, is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a, I'm phoning home from the center of one of the biggest parts of the fight. So we get to battle test all this stuff and some of the rougher parts of the terrain, and it's very effective, and it works very well for particularly that use case.
And what's really exciting for me as a guy who's been spending his career trying to develop and promote the need for, let's call it situational or operational awareness across the organization. We started this out as a response thing, and then it was more daily operations, but it was still about physical assets. This is now allowing that to move into the cyber world, and the cyber world can and will hurt you as much as the physical. And for the first time, we're going to be able to merge physical situational awareness and cyber situational awareness to provide entities true comprehensive situational awareness across their entire operation, whether it's physical or cyber. I've never seen it done before. It is absolutely needed, and what David and his team are doing is on the leading edge of allowing people to have this capability, and it's very exciting.
So we talked about your answer to the previous question, Chris, of what kind of organization could use this, and you said everyone. So that's the first really good answer. The second one would be, so you're listening to this, and a lot of this stuff, if you're not an IT person, sounds really, really complicated, but to you all, the experts, the people behind the curtain that manage all this stuff, it's really it's your life, it's what you do every day. How do you get the person like me who, yeah, that's great, just do it. How do you get those folks engaged so that they can start getting those conversations going within their organizations and say, hey, I saw this really cool technology today that's out there. I really don't know much about how it works, but I just know from what I saw, it's really, really cool. How do you get it from that it's really, really cool to we really need this? How do you get there?
Proof of concept. And as Chris mentioned, we did kind of go through, a dog's breakfast of what's required to make it work. But let me just simplify some of that. Whenever we put the probe on the front of the network, I mean, a lot of these cybersecurity tools very invasive. I mean, we simply just put a tap on the front of the network. Wherever we're touching the public internet, that's where we want to be. We're not inside of your network, so we're not inside behind the switch. We're on the public side, so we're seeing everything coming at the network and everything going out. And it's a simple, it's a 10-minute deal. It involves a site survey and installing, a very minimal footprint of a 1RU server, a Dell R240, and we're done. What happens with the geospatial side, as I mentioned, we just have a methodology, right? We go through, we look at all the IPs that are coming through. We know where the locations of the data centers are that the network's talking to, and we can assemble that in coordination with the CMDB team at the company, and every company that, everybody has that, right? And then we just start working to make that more accurate. So it's a very simple process. So to engage with a customer to get this done, we start with a POC. Let's come in, let's put some little piece of gear on prem, and let's show you what we can do and get them real comfortable that it's not invasive. This is not a 5-year plan. This is not a transition. It's a very simple process. And we'd be happy to start working with anyone who would like to get started with us.
And the geospatial side of that, Dave, is also it's the software most of you already own. It's a little bit of tradecraft, a little bit of data collection, the ability to join that to the data coming from GTI. and boom, how do you want to see it? Even those visualizations that Ray showed and David showed of the asset, those are configurable using pretty standard geospatial expertise, which many of you have, and if not, we'll teach you. So it is just a different way of using the tools. That's really what this is, and being able to connect them, not technically so much, but just connect them functionally to each other to give you some better answers to those questions. And that's the exciting thing about this, is when Dave and I put our head together, we're like, well, this is we can do this. You know, you've got what you do, we got what we do, we can put it together, and all of a sudden we have this new capability that everybody can implement. And he said it well. It's not a massive install of enterprise system. It's just some configuration.
Yeah, and
So,
yeah,
go
the
ahead, David.
mega projects here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia too, this is a big, big item for them. And as you see kind of this modern development of asset management inside of, sprawling IT infrastructure, this geospatial element of it is becoming, increasingly something that's not just observed anymore. It's something that, people are starting to integrate into their system. So another reason why I'm here, Chris and I are working on a couple of those as well.
I think by the visualization of the screens you shared, David, just shows, if you know nothing about it, just seeing here are all the things that your network is doing right now. I mean, from
Right.
me who knows nothing about IT, that's really impressive. And I know back in the day when Microsoft started building their data centers within the service territory, and I took some tours of their operating centers, seeing all of this stuff, it's just amazing the visibility of what the IT folks have behind the curtain. Putting this into a geospatial environment is probably right from the folks that are the day-to-day people that don't have that IT background look and see. But that's the key to it. I think that's what Chris was saying. It's just that's how you tie this geospatial stuff to the IT part behind it, and it brings it all together. A question came up from Dell about, and I think Ray, you probably answered earlier with the survey 1, 2, 3, but what does a physical site survey entail? The level or effort of detail of energy it takes to do that.
So that comes in. So that's yours, Ray. Go ahead.
No, I don't. I'm going to use Chris's answer from earlier. It depends. It really depends upon how spread out the components are, the assets are that you're trying to go build an inventory of. If you're very spread out, then perhaps there is more time involved and you've got to physically get, or if not that, be able to pick out very accurately on a map within the app to do it. But I think I would recommend actually going to the actual device and seeing if you can get the lat and long for it there. So yeah, that could be a tricky one. I guess if you have a fairly dense kind of situation there to walk around, you could probably knock out a lot of assets very quickly. If things are more spread out, if there's a lot more complication, then it's a little different situation.
And I'll just add to that, the ability to crawl, walk, run is real important because some of these projects we're working on currently are fairly large. But as I mentioned, we integrate immediately the CMDB database. We populate it with the known lat long data that comes out of MaxMind, the financial services product. That gets us with a baseline. And then we observe, okay, work with the customer, what's critical here? What's the criticality of what pieces of this network? And then we attack those first. So in terms of making the visits and getting the precise geospatial information.
Okay, another question, and I think I might have an answer to it myself, but it came up as, what can someone expect to have to pay for this? Many organizations have to weigh the cost of the possible impact with the cost of monitoring the product. And I think Tony Hurley answered this in one of his previous presentations yesterday. In one of the sessions that I attended, was that the cost that you have to pay for it, if you look at the cost of what you would have to pay if you didn't do this and your data got compromised, or your data or your all of your information got locked up in ransom share, what's that cost? And if your cost comes in less than that, it's probably got a business cost analysis to at least justify looking into it, right? So I don't know if I answered it right, but Chris, did I get close to that answer?
Yeah, it's a good answer. It's any mitigation project, whether it's building a dam or putting in cyber threat, cyber detection, situational awareness. That is the analysis. What's the cost of not doing it, and are you willing to absorb that risk? David, I know you've probably got some thoughts on that too.
Well, we, as I mentioned earlier, Systol is a very significant network operating center for the Fortune 50. They operate through Kyndryl, which was formerly an IBM company. Their services are very competitive. And, I mean, if you look at a 1 to 10 gig network, monthly recurring is relatively low for full MDR, for a full SOC, right? So if you said, look, we want you to turnkey this service for us and stand up the security operations center behind it for I just say a 5 to 10 gig network with millions and millions of events per day or per second. Sorry, you're talking about monthly recurring between $25,000 and $50,000. So moving down from there, if you got your own security operations center and we just need to integrate, the tooling, the cost goes down from there. And then if you've already got ASRI installed, then you're kind of just looking at, okay, what is it going to take for us to manpower up the integration of the geospatial elements? Once we get that done, we're just looking at the licensing and then just the care and feeding of the system going forward. So, we're not talking about a lot of money here, guys. It's not that expensive.
Well, it sounds to me that if you've got a business and your data is critical to your product or to the services that you're putting out there, that if you know that something like this exists and you don't at least take a look at it, what it would take to implement or what it would take to install within your network, seems you're doing yourself a disservice. That's just, and I knew nothing about this before this presentation. I want to look what I'm seeing here. So, and Chris always does this to me. He always shows me these products and he always talks it to a level that I can understand. It doesn't sound like it's rocket science to you guys to do it, but it doesn't sound like it's, that you're going to have to mortgage your business 5 times over. It sounds like it's something that at least asks the questions. I think all of your bios and links have been posted in the chat to start those conversations. If you're not a member, I think Laura put the information in to sense an information sharing environment, which Chris and his, Chris has a ton of his team members have been here that are working on that, probably 7 days a week. Start asking the questions and getting these folks that know this stuff and start safeguarding your information and your data and making it visible and if nothing else, if it's understanding that you're being attacked before the attack or when the attack is occurring, is probably that's 90% of the battle right there, right? If you found out that you've been shot after you've been shot 15 times and didn't have an idea that you could have run away and hidden, this is what this is doing for you. It's been that visibility of, hey, I need to take this out now. So this stuff is awesome. This technology, Chris, you never cease to amaze me.
Well, this is I'm very excited about this. I couldn't do it with the systems that David and GTI are creating, and their willingness to work with us at Bent Ear to combine the geospatial side. I mean, he got the vision very quickly, and we're making it happen. So yeah, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you. And this is real now. This is out there. This is a ability that is being deployed, and for anybody who as a cyber, many of the big organizations have a fusion center and a cyber fusion center, and the cyber fusion center probably doesn't have this capability. And if you don't have either one of those things, maybe what you don't know can hurt you. So we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, and so we've set up a quick site for, I can go to that real quick and I'll show you how to get to it. But if you just go to Global Threat Intel, whoops, of course I need to be able to spell. And you can see down here, we've got a button for the Resilience Exchange. And if you just click on that button, it pulls up all the contact information about all of us here, Ventir, Global Threat Intel, and we talked about Systol. And then you can click right here and ring Barry, and Barry's kind of set up to be able to kind of modulate all of the traffic coming in from here and get you guys pointed in the right direction. So we'd love to hear from you.
All right. Well, thank you, David, and Ray and Chris. This was a really interesting topic. Appreciate all the information you put in there.